How's it going, people? So, I had to get this off my chest because I saw X-Men Apocalypse. I saw it last week, and I had to kind of get some thoughts out there in regards to a lot of things, whether it's from the singer came out and started talking about the timeline, and I felt the need to kind of like just really set things straight. I'm gonna put it this way: I'm gonna do a better job of explaining the X-Men timeline than what Singer and the people at Fox have done, and also kind of address some other things as well. Because we're doing a podcast on X-Men Apocalypse in a couple of days and stuff, and I just wanted to get this out there, and I'll probably reiterate that a little bit and stuff. Um, the timeline. Now, the timeline goes like this: you got X-Men Origins, you got X-Men 1, you got X-Men 2, you got X-Men 3. Okay. You got the Wolverine, which takes place after X3. The after credits ending for X-Men 3, for the Wolverine, takes place after X3, where, if you remember, at the end of X3, Charles got vanquished by the Phoenix, but he made that theory that a person's essence can go inside, the morality of putting your essence and, and mind inside of another person's body. So, long story short, Charles is alive and well. Magneto kind of sort of has his powers back and stuff, because again, at the end of the Last Stand, you saw Magneto move the chess piece, which shows that the cure was kind of a temporary thing. So whatever. Um, so you got that happening. So that's that era of movies, that period. You got X-Men First Class, which you know, which was a prequel to um, everything. It was showing how Xavier and Eric and all of them met, and fine movie. That's what we got. Days of Future Past is kind of a convergence of timelines and where the timelines could have differentiated. Now, if you remember correctly, X3, we find out a lot of things such as Xavier putting mind blocks in Jean and all the stuff which caused the chaos in X3. Now, Days of Future Past, the future team is pretty much the future that we got that was alluded to at the end of the Wolverine. So that's that future for that timeline. Days of Future Past is kind of rectifying what jump started that future and stuff, which is that assassination and stuff, whatever. Now, there was a scene in Days of Future Past where young Xavier is looking in the mind of time travel Wolverine, and he sees pretty much everything that he went through and just all the stuff, including Jean and all the stuff happening. So what you end up happening is you prevents that future from happening, and we see Wolverine wake up in a future where it looks like Jean Grey has control of her powers, and Scott Summers is alive and well, and everything's fine and well. So that's that new future, right? That's the new future. Here's the problem that comes into it: X-Men Apocalypse. Now, if you remember at the end of Days of Future Past, Wolverine is getting fished out the Potomac River, and we see Stryker there. Now we're thinking, okay, so I guess this is how Wolverine gets his adamantium. Stryker finds him and, fishes him out, and he's going to experiment with them. Well, that's not what happened. What we end up getting is the reveal that Stryker is actually Mystique in disguise. So I'm thinking, okay, it's going to be different, so I wonder how Wolverine is going to get his adamantium and stuff. Well, Apocalypse just says fuck that plot point, and somehow Wolverine ends up in Weapon X hands because reasons. We don't get the explanation as to how Stryker knew about that or anything like that. Nothing. And it causes confusion. But I digress. That's what we're getting. Now, in Apocalypse, like I said, spoilers with Apocalypse, Professor X realizes Jean Grey has the Phoenix in her, which I will give the movie credit. That is a plot point that he saw from Wolverine's head in Days of Future Past. Fine. So Jean Grey in Apocalypse uses the Phoenix Force to defeat Apocalypse. It's fucking stupid saying that, but that's essentially what happened. So it kind of ties into the theory that I guess if Jean Grey accepted the Phoenix power, then that's the future that we got where she's accepting it and she's just, doing what she has to do. Cool, fine. That's pretty much the timeline in a nutshell. Essentially, these movies are going into that future that Logan saw at the end of Days of Future Past when he woke up and stuff, with the new realized future. So, fine. That's what we got established and stuff. So I hope that works out. If you got questions, hit me up on Twitter. I'll definitely be cool with elaborating on that. So that being said, right? So Apocalypse is out this weekend and stuff, and from all reports, this 3-day weekend, I don't know if it tallies up Monday since it's Memorial Day weekend holiday. X-Men Apocalypse is making $65 million. Now, if this was any other movie, it'd be doomed to flop, superhero fatigue, blah blah blah. I'm just gonna put this out here right now. There is no superhero fatigue. Here's what you got. Bryan Singer has been part of this franchise since 2000. Now, Bryan Singer isn't a fan of the comics. Bryan Singer really just films the movies however he sees fit. Fine. As a fan, you use the material that you have and you expound on it. We as fans aren't expecting these movies to be scene for scene, shot for shot like the comics. But there should be reverence to the respect of the comics and stuff. When I watch Apocalypse, there is nothing about Magneto from the comics that dictates that he would join up with Apocalypse. But in this movie, he joins up with Apocalypse. Even though Apocalypse is all about genocide, which is something that Magneto, who, by the way, is a survivor of the Holocaust. Survivor of the Holocaust, and he joins up with Apocalypse, who wants to do genocide and destroy the world. Common Magneto wouldn't do that. Doesn't make sense. Archangel dies in a fucking plane crash. The character that flies dies in a plane crash. But I digress. When I watch a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, right, I see movies that respect the characters and the source material where they come from, and that's what I'm getting. When I see Robert Downey Jr. playing Tony Stark, he acts exactly like Tony Stark from the comics. The mannerisms and how he acts and what he does, that's Tony Stark. That is the Tony Stark that I read about in comics. When I see Chris Evans Captain America, that is the Captain America that I remember from the comics. Mannerisms and all. That is who he is. Thor, to a point, that's the Thor that I know from the comics. To a point. It could be better. Even though I feel the two Thor movies are just, whatever. You get what I'm saying. I can go on and on all these characters. And my thing is that these MCU movies have shown reverence to these characters and where they're from. And they're not afraid to embrace that comic book side of... They're not afraid to embrace the comic book roots. I know there are some hardcore comic book people that are just like, these movies are just flash and blank blank. You're an idiot if you say that. The fact is, when I look at the X-Men movies, First Class is the only one to me that felt like there was a breath of fresh air to it. And maybe it's because Matthew Vaughn was directing it. And I've always sat there and said, Fox needs to stop hanging on Singer's nutsack. You need fresh blood in the mix, because if you don't have fresh blood in the mix, it's going to cause stale. And when Matthew Vaughn came on First Class, it was awesome, it was fresh, it was cool. We saw a different dimension to the Magneto and Xavier dynamics and stuff. It was awesome. Dynamics of the team, how they brought the team. It was awesome. It was cool. I loved it. But then we go back to Singer, and Singer's style in Days of Future Past and even in this Apocalypse is too much of a throwback to when he first started off in X-Men in 2000 X-Men. And is rooted in that, hey, we're afraid of the source material, let's not do that. Which I'm like, no, the comic book movie industry has evolved so much. I'll even give DC credit for evolving with that. Look, I walked out of Batman v Superman with just, it was alright. I wanted to be excited. I came out like, okay, well, hey, I saw Batman and Superman fight. It was cool. I was just like, hey, I want them to do better. And I'm actually hyped for David Ayer's Suicide Squad. I think it's going to be pretty dope. But these movies thrive on having fresh blood, having different insight on things. And when I look at the X-Men, I don't get that. First Class is the only one that gave me that, like, oh my god, this is awesome. And it's just, I don't hate Bryan Singer, it's just his style is still as shit. And these films could be better. Like, here's my thing too. Everybody lumps in on the MCU films for diversity, and yet the diversity that we get in these X-Men films has always been window dressing shit. Like, I'm sorry, like, I just, like, when I look at the MCU, the black and the minority characters are treated with a bit of reverence and respect. I mean, we just came out of Civil War where 3 prominent black characters, Black Panther, War Machine, and Falcon, weren't just window dressing. They had stuff that they were doing, and they were featured prominently, and they had a lot of shining moments. And I'm seeing, and even beyond that, we're getting more black women are getting involved in these movies, and I love it. I want to see, I'm seeing that Marvel's we're gonna probably see a lot of Asian characters and stuff get pushed to the front. I mean, we're getting that with Agents of Shield, but in the movie wise, I can see that happening. I see Latino. I see that happening. When I look at X-Men, I don't see that. Like Storm in the movie, I think Alexandra Shipp was pretty good at Storm. She kept the accent better than Halle Berry, mind you. But she wasn't giving shit to do. And that's a problem. Olivia Munn with Psylocke wasn't giving jack shit to do, and she was training. We saw Instagram videos. Didn't get nothing to do. Jubilee. Singer sat there and said, fan favorite, Jubilee. You know, she's going to be in a movie. Jubilee didn't do shit. Nothing. She was just there. Looking good in her outfit. That's it. So, I say all that to say, it making $65 million this weekend isn't shocking. People are tired of it. Now compare Apocalypse to Deadpool, a movie that had 2 X-Men characters in Colossus, who was pretty much like the Colossus that we know and love from the comics, accent and all, very just stoic and wants to do the right thing. And Negasonic Teenage Warhead, again, pretty good character. I love it. In the X-Men uniforms, wasn't the drab, muted colors. Deadpool got the X-Men right before the X-Men movies could. And that's sad. We deserve more. And look, I'm not saying these X-Men movies got to be like the MCU. Just get people on board that actually get the characters. Get the characters. 6 X-Men movies, and all of it revolves around Charles and fucking Eric's conflict. All of it revolves around Wolverine, and the focus on this new one, these new ones since First Class on Mystique, who I don't fucking care about Mystique because I don't care about her. She's a pretty good character as a foil for the X-Men at times, but I don't care about her being part of the X-Men. I don't. So I say all that to say, I'm not surprised it made $65 million. And even if it makes $80 million, it should be doing better. These X-Men films could be making $1 billion easily, but they're not. And yet we got 4 MCU movies that got over $1 billion. 2 Avengers movies, the Iron Man movie, and Captain America. We're talking about characters who for a long time were like second tier to the X-Men, who were big names. X-Men and Spider-Man were big names back in the day. Not so much now. I mean, Spider-Man is on the come up now since there, and we're getting their homecoming, but back in the day, it was Spider-Man and X-Men that ruled. Nobody gave a shit about the Avengers. I mean, sure, people were reading it, but nobody gave a shit. And now it's like roles reversed on the movie side, where we care more about the Avengers and what they're doing, and, you know, we care about Spider-Man now since he's part of it, but the X-Men, they exist. Could be better. And the irony of all this is that, like, we see... Like, I've heard people say that Bryan Singer likes the 90s X-Men cartoon, but let's be real about this. 90s X-Men cartoon was better than these movies. Hate to say it to you. They just were. You know, I mean, like I said, the X-Men cartoon was pretty cool until that last season. They changed the animation, but, like, the ideals of what the comics established was in that show. It was in that show. Like, if you want a good idea of what X-Men Apocalypse could have been, I sat there and put this on Twitter. Watch the Beyond Good and Evil arc. I think it's a 4-part series from the 90s X-Men anime series. The episodes are probably on YouTube. And you'll see everything, and you'll see the reason why people like me and everybody else was disappointed in X-Men Apocalypse, because the Apocalypse you see on that show is not what we got in the movies. It's not. You know, and like I said, compare X-Men Apocalypse to Civil War, which had tons of moments. I can't really name a single moment in X-Men Apocalypse that stood out to me. I mean, we can shout out Quicksilver in that scene, but let's be real about this too. Just an aside, Quicksilver ain't that fucking fast. I'm sorry, he's not. He's never been that fast. He's never had Speed Force level powers. He's never did. And that's another thing with Bryan Singer. He doesn't establish characters' powers. There was zero reason why, as much as I love First Class, there was no reason why Darwin should have died. A character whose ability is to adapt to his situation, survival of the fittest. When he gets blown up, his body reforms itself. It gets hardened. You know, that his character is essentially immortal, but First Class killed him because reasons, and that's some Bryan Singer shit. You know, Bishop in Days of Future Past, his powers, he gets blown, he dies because he gets overflown with power and blows up. In the comics, whenever he's overflown with power, he just unleashes it and then, you know, he passes out, but he doesn't die. Again, you don't establish these characters' powers and you make them too damn broken. Nothing about Quicksilver scenes, don't get me wrong, it's a nice scene, it's chuckle-worthy at best, but nothing about that should make sense for a character like that. Quicksilver was never that fast. The Flash, Barry Allen, and that whole family is fast because Speed Force. They're just broken as shit anyway. But Quicksilver, no, he's a speedster. In the most plainest sense possible, he's a speedster. We got the speedster in Age of Ultron and stuff, which I think we're going to get that character back too. But that's Quicksilver in a nutshell. When you look at Age of Ultron and see how Quicksilver in that movie functions, that's Quicksilver. He's fast, but he ain't that ridiculously quick. Nothing about Quicksilver from the comics will put him in the position to be able to save everybody in that mansion. To me, it was just a scene that just made it look cool, and that's it. You know, but I just had to get that out there because it's just people are sitting up there acting as though this superhero fatigue, and it's not superhero fatigue, people. It's just we're just tired of the stale style of X-Men, and we just want a breath of fresh air. Deadpool showed that there is no superhero fatigue. People love Deadpool because there was a sense of heart to it. There was a sense of people gave a shit behind the scenes behind it. That's the reason why everybody floods to these MCU movies. And I'll say Batman v Superman to a point. There's heart behind it. Hey, I might not like Bryan Singer's style at times and stuff like that, but at least I know where he's coming at it with. There's some heart behind it. I get it. You know. But it's just I don't get that in these X-Men movies. Like I said, Sans First Class, I don't get that in these X-Men movies. You know, it just feels like it's just, hey, let's just throw this character in there and that's it. So I had to get that out there. Be on the lookout for the X-Men Apocalypse podcast. Probably dropping in another 2-3 days or so and stuff like that. But I just had to get that off my chest because, yeah, I had to. So hope to catch you guys later and keep listening to the Three Black Geeks show and such. And yeah, that's it. Later.